Thinking about what to say today, having not been in the pulpit for a while, and having been here for Reverend Baden's sermon last week, I thought, I'm not even going to try to follow that one up. Not even going to try. And I do have a lot to say to you in the coming weeks and months. But today I'm going to keep it very simple and very basic. One of the members of the pastor parish committee called me when I got back from Spain and said, well, has God been talking to you? Did God talk to you this last 3 months? And without going into detail, I said, yeah, God has been talking to me. And, it's one of those things it's not in the Bible, but it should be. God speaks in mysterious ways. Sometimes when you least expect it. And actually, one of the ways God spoke to me was through a television program. I don't watch much television. I don't particularly like miniseries or series that run week to week because with my schedule, I usually miss half of them. But some years ago, I did get hooked on The Sopranos. Now, I am not recommending this program. This did not come from me. But it's one of the shows I got into, and you can only watch about a third of them. So someone, at the beginning of my sabbatical, gave me to watch the entire 6 seasons of The Sopranos. And one of my commitments was to watch the whole thing from beginning to end. Well, to be honest, I still have one box left, but I'm going to finish it. But there's one moment, one vignette in particular that kind of hit me, kind of blindsided me, and kind of inspired me. One of the characters is named Artie. And Artie has a restaurant, Vesuvio. He gave birth to this Italian restaurant. He put his heart and soul into it. He comes from a family of chefs, and it was a very successful restaurant for a long time. But most recently, the restaurant has declined. And one of the reasons it's declined is because Artie is no longer in the kitchen cooking the food. He's farmed the cooking out. He's out schmoozing with the customers, and Vesuvio is not what it used to be. So the business is suffering, and Artie is somewhat depressed. And one night, right about at closing time, in fact, the door is locked. There's a knock on the door, and there's a young couple who comes to the restaurant that wants to eat. They're just famished. And so Artie's wife collars him back in the kitchen and says, I hate to bother you, but this couple has come, and it's their anniversary, and they really want to come here and eat something special. Is there anything you can do? So Artie goes, well, I'll go in the back and whip up some leftovers. Just throw something on the table for them. So he goes back into the kitchen, and he starts to think, and he notices on the shelf his father's cookbook. Now, his father taught him to cook. And he gets that cookbook, and he opens it, and he gets inspired to create this old family recipe, this wonderful dish. And he cooks this fabulous meal just for this one little couple out in the dining room. And that act reignites in him his true passion and his true calling, which is not so much to run a business as it is to cook food with love and with passion. And I watched that, and I thought, I need to get back into the kitchen. No, I never really left the kitchen, but it just reminded me that this is my calling, to do what I do right here, right now. This is why God called me, to preach the gospel. And you all make it possible for me to do that every week, to give myself to this ministry. There are a lot of things that ministers have to do. They have to be counselors and administrators and entrepreneurs. But for me, it was 30 years ago, it was this calling and it was this passion to preach the gospel. And one of my goals for my sabbatical was to renew my calling, and I feel that's happened. After all these years, although my ideas have changed, even somewhat radically, I still believe this stuff. At its root, I still believe it. At the center of the universe is a loving, gracious, compassionate presence who loves us and longs for us to be in a living, life-giving relationship and calls us continually in that direction. I still believe that stuff. And that has always been my mission, my personal mission. I wrote it down years ago, and I really haven't deviated from it. To communicate this good news in such a way that people are inspired and educated and transformed. So that that little segment from The Sopranos was just kind of a reminder for me that I need to be doing a lot of stuff. There's a lot of work to do here, and I have the time to do it. That's what I'm here for. But I need to stay in the kitchen, because what we do here, what we gather here for every week, is the very heartbeat of what this church is about. So that was one of the ways that God spoke to me. And that's the question that I tried to ask myself when I was gone. How is God at work in my life this particular moment, at this time in my life, right now? And that is the pastoral question. And that is the question that I try to bring before you in many ways. That's the work of the minister, to continually bring that question to the fore. How is God at work in my life at this moment, regardless of what I'm going through? How is God at work in our lives, in our world, in our society, in our economy right now? How is God at work in us in light of what's happening all around us? And I had to think about that question, because it hit me like a ton of bricks when I came back. It was everywhere. This financial crisis that the country is facing. So my sermon title actually comes from the latest edition of U.S. News and World Report. And the title article was, "How Afraid Should We Be?" That really piqued my interest. How afraid should we be in light of this financial crisis? The big one. The biggest one since the Great Depression. And I know some of you lived through that and remember it quite well. And I'm sure it evokes feelings in you. But how afraid should we be? And as I ruminated on that question, I had a conversation with a lady that just lost her husband. And she said, you know, when these things happen, whatever they are, they really make us think about what's important in life. Faith and family and friends. And she also threw in fun, which probably isn't a bad one, but what's real and important. And so as I ruminated on that question, how afraid should we be, it made me think of another question. In whom or what do we put our trust?